Hello, this is Bob from Bob CNC, and welcome to the troubleshooting series. Today we're going to look at an Evolution 4, and we're going to diagnose home switches or answer the question, why will my machine not home? Okay, so the first thing that we're going to show you is what it looks like when it homes correctly. So you'll see on our UGS screen that you're in the alarm mode, and then once I hit home, it'll turn green and show homing, and once it homes successfully, it will be in idle. So here we go. All right, now the machine here is actually in the idle mode, which means it homes successfully. However, if you're watching this video, that's probably not happening. So here's what I'm going to try first. I'll go ahead and turn off the power so that I can move this thing by hand. And I'm going to hold everything up against the home switches and then go ahead and turn it back on. Now, the one thing that you would notice here, if you know what to look for, is that on your USG screen, it shows you down here in the digital state DRO window that the alarm XZ is active. Well, we can see that this one's not active, so it must be this X2 home switch that's active. So what's going to happen when I go ahead and hit home? Well, let's give it a shot, see what happens. Z is going down, and yet then it goes back into the alarm mode. This is because when the machine homes, it assumes that the Z is going to move first. Well, since the Z and the X2 home switch are tied together, it thinks that the Z is all the way at the top, so it's trying to get down a little bit, and then it doesn't remove itself, right? It's still on there, so it gives an error, all right? It's an easy way to fix this is to not be on the home switch when you click home. So if you unplug the machine and you just move it up a little bit and plug it in, then you will see that it will home successfully. All right, so that's the first one. Now, let's go just through the home switches and take a look at where they're at, okay? So if I look at my machine, and again, I'll go ahead and unplug it so that we can move it around. So you'll see right here, if I hold the Z home switch with my finger, and then I look on my computer screen again, it will show the alarm XZ. Again, that's because the Z and the X2 are tied together. If I hold this one and I look at my computer screen, you'll see that it is the alarm Y. And of course, if I go to the back and find the X home switch over here on this side, not the X2, this is the X1, right? It will show up as alarm X. And then if I hold this one up here, it will show up as alarm XZ because the X2 and the Z are tied together. So what can happen? Well, the first thing that can happen is these switches are actually wired in reverse. If you have the XZ alarm over here, then this will not home, right? Because each switch activates its own stepper motor, so they need to be correct. So let's try something. Let's say the X home switch just somehow got unplugged. Let's see what happens there. So again, you ought to be able to see that that's not going to work because on your screen you're going to have the alarm X and it's not touching any home switches. But if you clicked home, you would see that only one side moved because it really thought that this side already got there. Okay, so it's waiting at the end because it thinks it's already at the back. The same thing would happen no matter what switch that we disconnected from the back. So you might see that, I'm going to go ahead and unplug it to release the tension there. And then I'll go ahead and try to plug this one back into the right spot. But you ought to be able to see from looking at your screen and holding or closing your home switches that they're acting properly. So let's say that, okay, they're all acting like they should, and I looked at the manual and the way I have it connected is right on the money. Maybe you change the firmware. So in order to change the firmware back, you can go here to the command text box like I'm showing you in the on the UGS screen and type in $RST equals $, and press enter. What does that do? That sets all the firmware back to the default values. So what could have happened if you were in like the setup wizard? You could have inverted the stepper motors or home switch switches and they won't work properly. So other things that you might check, if the screws are too tight, there are plastic switches, you can actually jam the switch. So we want them snug, but you don't need to over tighten them. You don't need to clamp them. You just need to keep them from wiggling around, right? So that would be another thing that you can check. The last thing would be is a loose wire, right? So if you have one of your wires fell out of your pins, or maybe it broke off of the switch, you may need to solder it back on or get you a replacement switch. So that is how we diagnosed home switches. And if you have the home switches working properly and all your motors are working and connected to the right spot, then it should connect properly. All right? Or home properly. That's it for today. Thanks, guys.